Africa, in the peaceful village of Lumora, a kind-hearted woman named Nabinti marries Seku, a wealthy and respected merchant. The entire village gathers to celebrate their union, filling the air with music, laughter, and the sweet aroma of freshly prepared feasts. The sound of drums echoes through the night as dancers move gracefully under the moonlight. Elders offer their blessings, wishing the couple a life filled with happiness and prosperity. Nabinti, dressed in the finest traditional attire, smiles with joy, believing she has found her soulmate. Seku is admired by many, not just for his wealth, but also for his generosity and wisdom in business. He has built a strong reputation by trading valuable goods, traveling to faraway lands, and bringing prosperity to Lumora. Many women had dreamed of being his wife, but he chose Nabinti, a woman known for her kindness and beauty. She feels honored and proud to stand beside him as his wife, imagining a future filled with love and security. After the wedding, Nabinti moves into Seku's grand home, a place more magnificent than anything she has ever seen. The walls are decorated with colorful fabrics, and the furniture is carved from the finest wood. Servants attend to her needs, ensuring she wants for nothing. Every morning, she wakes up to the scent of fresh flowers in the courtyard and the soft sounds of birds singing. Everything feels perfect, as if she is living in a dream. Seku showers her with love and affection, bringing her beautiful gifts from his travels: golden jewelry, rare perfumes, and silk dresses. In the evenings, they sit together under the starlit sky, sharing stories and laughter. He speaks to her in a gentle voice, promising to always take care of her. Nabinti's heart is full, and she believes her life will always be this perfect. She does not realize that beneath the surface of her happiness, a hidden truth waits to reveal itself. At first, everything in Nabinti's marriage felt like a dream. Seku was loving, attentive, and always by her side. But as the months passed, something began to change. It was small at first: late-night whispers, a distracted gaze, moments of silence when she spoke to him. Then, the distance grew. Seku started leaving home more often, traveling to another village without giving a clear reason. Whenever she asked where he was going, he would smile but never answer directly. "I have business to handle," he would say. "Don't worry, my love." But Nabinti couldn't help but worry. The man who once spent every evening with her now disappeared for days. When he returned, his eyes looked tired, his mind elsewhere. He no longer sat with her under the stars or listened to her stories. He barely even noticed the special meals she prepared for him. Something was wrong, but he refused to talk about it. Then, there were the letters. Seku started receiving them regularly, always delivered by the same young messenger. Nabinti would watch from the window as the boy handed him a sealed envelope, and Seku would tuck it away before she could see. He never read the letters in front of her. Instead, he locked himself in his study, and when he came out, he would burn the papers in the fire. Nabinti's heart ached with confusion. Who was writing to him? Why was he hiding it? One evening, as they sat at dinner, she gathered the courage to ask, "Seku, who sends you these letters?" His hand froze over his plate. For a moment, he did not speak. Then, he forced a smile. "Just merchants from the other village," he said casually. "It's nothing important." But Nabinti wasn't convinced. If it was nothing, why did he keep it a secret? Feeling lost and alone, she turned to her closest friend, Tamar. Tamar had been her companion since childhood, the one person who always gave her honest advice. One afternoon, as they sat by the river washing clothes, Nabinti finally spoke of her troubles. "I don't understand what is happening, Tamar," she said, her voice trembling. "Seku has changed. He leaves without telling me where he is going, and he hides letters from me." Tamar frowned, wringing the water out of her cloth. "That is not a good sign, Nabinti. A husband should not keep secrets from his wife." Nabinti lowered her eyes. "Maybe I'm just overthinking." Tamar shook her head. "No, my sister. When a woman's heart senses something is wrong, she must listen. Watch him closely. Pay attention to the signs." Nabinti nodded, but deep inside, her heart was already heavy with fear. Something was happening, something she did not understand. And no matter how much she wished for things to return to the way they were, she knew that her perfect marriage was beginning to crack. That evening, the wind carried a strange stillness through the village of Lumora. Nabinti stood by the doorway, watching as Seku rushed out of the house. He barely looked at her, his footsteps quick, his face tense. He always left in a hurry these days, but tonight was different. In his rush, he forgot one of his bags, the small leather pouch he always kept close. Nabinti's eyes followed the bag. lying abandoned near the wooden chair. Her heart pounded. She had never dared to go through his things before, but something inside her whispered that the answers she sought were right there. Slowly, with trembling hands, she picked up the bag. For a moment, she hesitated. What if she was wrong? What if it was just another business document? But then she remembered the distant look in Sekou's eyes, the letters he hid, the nights he returned smelling of unfamiliar scents. Her hands clenched the bag tighter. She had to know. Taking a deep breath, she opened it. Inside, there were a few coins, a handkerchief, and a folded letter sealed with red wax. Nabinti stared at it, her fingers shaking as she broke the seal. As she unfolded the letter, her eyes widened at the words written in careful, flowing handwriting. My dearest Sekou, I long for the day when we will no longer have to hide. Every moment apart from you is painful, but I trust in your promises. You are my love, my husband, my everything. I wait for you, as always. Forever yours, Nia. Nabinti's hands went cold. The letter nearly slipped from her fingers. The words blurred before her eyes as she struggled to breathe. Nia, a name she had never heard before. A woman who called Sekou her husband. Her chest tightened. This couldn't be true. It had to be a mistake. But no, Sekou's name was there, clear as day. The words were filled with love, longing, and secrets. Nabinti read the letter again, hoping she had misunderstood, but the truth stared back at her, cruel and undeniable. Her husband had another wife. A sharp pain shot through her heart, as if someone had driven a knife into her chest. The life she thought she had, the love she believed in, it was all a lie. Sekou had stood beside her, held her, whispered promises of devotion, while another woman waited for him somewhere else, believing in the same promises. Tears welled in Nabinti's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. A storm of emotions raged within her: anger, betrayal, sorrow. How could he do this to her? How long had he been lying? And worse, did the entire village know while she remained blind? She clenched the letter in her fist, her breathing heavy. One thing was clear. She could no longer pretend everything was fine. Sekou had deceived her, and now she had to decide what to do next. The night felt heavier than usual. Nabinti sat in the dimly lit room, the letter clenched tightly in her hand. The words still burned in her mind. My husband, my love, my everything. Her heart pounded, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had cried enough. Now she needed answers. The wooden door creaked open, and Sekou stepped in, dust clinging to his clothes from his travels. He looked tired, but to Nabinti, he was a stranger now. The man she had loved, trusted, he was someone else. She watched as he set down his bag, stretching his arms as if everything was normal, but nothing was normal. Nabinti took a deep breath and spoke, her voice steady but sharp. Who is Naya? Sekou froze. His hands stiffened mid-movement. Slowly, he turned to face her, his expression unreadable. What are you talking about? He asked, forcing a weak smile. Nabinti held up the letter. I found this, she said. You forgot your bag. For a moment, Sekou just stared at the letter, his face pale. Then, in an instant, he let out a nervous chuckle. It's nothing, he said, waving his hand dismissively. You're misunderstanding. Don't lie to me. Her voice was firm, stronger than she felt inside. I read it, Sekou. She calls you her husband. Silence filled the room. The flickering lantern cast long shadows on the walls. Sekou's shoulders sagged as he let out a deep sigh. He knew there was no escape now. Yes, he finally admitted. Nia is my wife. Nabinti felt her breath catch, even though she had already known. Hearing him say it made the truth even more painful. How long? She whispered. Sekou ran a hand over his face. Before you, he said. I married her first, but it was a secret. No one in Lumora knows. Her stomach twisted. And me? She asked. Was I a secret too? Did you ever plan to tell me? Sekou looked away. I didn't want to lose you, he murmured. You're everything to me, Nabinti. I love you both. The words made her sick. Love. Was this love? To deceive her? To make her believe she was the only one, while another woman waited for him in another village? I had the right to know, Nabinti said, her voice shaking with anger. You took that from me. Sekou stepped forward, reaching for her hand, but she pulled away. Nabinti, please, he said. Let me explain. She shook her head. No, she said. I don't need your explanations. I just need to know one thing. What else are you hiding? Sekou opened his mouth, but no words came. His silence was answer enough. Nabinti felt her heart shatter, but she stood tall. She had discovered the truth, and now she had a choice to make. The weight of betrayal sat heavy in Nabinti's chest, but she knew she couldn't live in the shadows of lies. She needed answers. She needed to see the other woman. She needed to face Nia. Her best friend, Tamar, held her hands tightly as they sat under the large baobab tree in the village square. "Are you sure about this?" Tamar asked, concern in her voice. "It will be painful." Nabinti nodded. "I have to know the truth," she said. "I need to hear it from her." With Tamar by her side, she prepared for the journey to Mabundo, the village where Nia lived. The road was long and dusty, the midday sun burning their backs as they traveled. But Nabinti barely felt the heat. Her mind was restless, filled with questions. What was Nia like? Did she know about her? Did she love Sekou the way Nabinti once did? Would she be cruel or kind? When they finally reached Mabundo, the village was quiet, the scent of roasting maize filling the air. Tamar asked around for Nia's home, and an elderly woman pointed them toward a small mud-brick house near the market. With her heart pounding, Nabinti stepped forward and knocked. Moments later, the door creaked open, and there she stood, Nia. Nabinti was expecting someone different, maybe a woman full of arrogance or pride. Instead, she saw a tired, beautiful woman with sad eyes and a face that held too many unspoken words. Nia's dark brows furrowed in confusion as she looked at Nabinti. "Yes?" she asked hesitantly. Nabinti swallowed the lump in her throat. "My name is Nabinti," she said carefully. I'm Sekou's wife." The moment the words left her lips, Nia's eyes widened in shock. She took a small step back, her breath catching in her throat. "No," she whispered. "That can't be true." But Nabinti saw it in her eyes. This was news to her too. Nia looked from Nabinti to Tamar, her hands trembling as she gripped the doorframe. "You're lying," she said, but her voice lacked confidence. Nabinti reached into her bag and pulled out the letter, the same letter she had found in Sekou's belongings. She handed it to Nia, who took it with shaking hands. As she read the familiar words of love, the truth crashed over her like a tidal wave. Tears welled up in Nia's eyes. She clutched the letter to her chest, her whole body shaking. "He told me I was the only one," she whispered. Nabinti felt her own pain mix with Nia's. The betrayal was deeper than she had thought. Sekou hadn't just lied to her, he had lied to them both. For the first time, the two women stood together, not as enemies, but as two hearts broken by the same man. Nabinti and Nia sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared pain filling the small room. The betrayal ran deep, but what hurt the most was the realization that they had both trusted Sekou completely. He had looked them in the eyes, whispered promises of love, and made them believe they were his only one. But it had all been lies. Nia broke the silence first, wiping away her tears. "He told me he would never take another wife," she said, her voice shaking. "He made me swear my loyalty to him, and all this time he was already with you." Nabinti swallowed hard. "He said the same to me. He made me believe I was the only woman in his life. I never would have married him if I had known the truth." The anger in Nia's eyes burned just as fiercely as the anger in Nabinti's heart. But instead of turning against each other, they found comfort in their shared pain. They began talking, really talking, about all the little signs they had ignored. The unexplained trips, the hidden letters, the way Sekou would sometimes avoid answering questions. "He played us both," Nia said bitterly. "And for what? His own selfish desires." Nabinti clenched her fists. "We can't let him get away with this. We can't let him continue to lie and pretend he's done nothing wrong." Nia took a deep breath, as if gathering her strength. "You're right. He doesn't get to decide our future anymore. We do." For the first time since discovering the truth, Nabinti felt a sense of power returning to her. She had spent too long feeling like a victim, but now, sitting across from Nia, she realized she wasn't alone in this. Sekou had tried to control them both, but he had underestimated them. They made a decision right then and there. They would no longer allow Sekou to hold power over their lives. They would not waste their energy on jealousy or hatred toward each other. Instead, they would stand together. Nia sat up straighter, her voice filled with newfound determination. "I refuse to let him treat me like some forgotten secret. If he thought he could keep us hidden from each other forever, he was wrong." Nabinti nodded. "We deserve better than a man who treats us like we are nothing more than possessions." A quiet understanding passed between them. They were no longer just two women who had been lied to. They were now allies, united by a common betrayal, but strengthened by their decision to take control of their own lives. That day, they walked out of Nia's home not as rivals, but as two women who had been deceived, yet refused to be broken. Sekou had expected them to be blind, But now they saw everything clearly, and they would make sure he faced the consequences of his deception. News of Seku's betrayal spread like wildfire through the village of Lumora. People whispered about how he had deceived not just one wife, but two. The elders, known for their wisdom and fairness, could not ignore such a scandal. They sent word for Sekou to appear before them and explain himself. When Sekou arrived at the gathering place, he was met with cold, judgmental stares. The elders sat in a semicircle, their expressions stern. The villagers, curious about the outcome, gathered nearby to watch. Nabinti and Nia stood side by side, their presence a silent but powerful statement. Elder Bako, the most respected among them, spoke first. Sekou, you are a man of wealth and status, but today, we are not here to talk about your riches. We are here to speak of your dishonesty. You took 2 wives, but you did so through deception. Do you deny this? Sekou shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat. Elders, with all due respect, I did what any man would do. It is not uncommon for a man to have more than 1 wife. Elder Bako's eyes narrowed. It is not the number of wives that concerns us, Sekou. It is the lies. You promised each woman she was the only one. You kept them in the dark. That is not the way of an honorable man. Sekou tried to defend himself, but every excuse he gave only made things worse. The elders saw through his words. The villagers shook their heads, whispering among themselves. The more he spoke, the clearer it became. Sekou was not the wise, respectable man they had once believed him to be. His downfall did not stop at public shame. His business, once thriving, began to crumble. Word of his dishonesty reached his trade partners in the neighboring villages. They no longer trusted him, fearing that if he could lie to his own wives, he could just as easily lie in business. One by one, they withdrew their support. Orders were cancelled, deals were broken, and the once busy marketplace where he sold his goods grew quiet. Without business, money stopped flowing. Without money, servants and workers left. The luxurious home that Nabinti had once admired became emptier each day. Even his friends distanced themselves from him, not wanting to be associated with a man who had lost the respect of the village. Sekou, who had once walked through Lumora with pride, now kept his head down when he passed through the streets. The same people who once praised him now muttered behind his back. Some even laughed, saying, "A man who deceives his own family cannot be trusted with anything." For the first time in his life, Sekou felt what it was like to lose everything. His money, his reputation, his power, all slipping away like water through his fingers. And the worst part, he had no one to blame but himself. Nabinti and Nya refused to let their lives be defined by Sekou's betrayal. They had suffered enough, and now it was time to reclaim their happiness. Instead of staying in a broken marriage, waiting for a man who had deceived them, they chose a different path, one of strength, independence, and self-worth. Naya had always been skilled in trade. Even before she married Sekou, she knew how to weave beautiful fabrics and create stunning designs that caught the eye of merchants. Now, with her marriage behind her, she poured all her energy into building a business of her own. She set up a small textile shop in Mabundo, where people quickly noticed the quality of her work. Word spread, and soon, traders from other villages came to buy her fabrics. She was no longer just a wife, she was a businesswoman, respected and admired for her craft. Nabinti, on the other hand, had a gift for healing. Growing up, she had watched her grandmother use herbs to treat the sick. She had always been fascinated by the power of nature, and now she decided to use her knowledge to help others. She started a small healing practice in Lumora, offering remedies for common ailments. At first, only a few people came to her, but as they saw the results, more and more villagers sought her help. Her reputation grew, and soon, even people from neighboring villages traveled to see her. Despite living in different villages, Nabinti and Nia remained close. They visited each other often, offering support and encouragement. They were no longer bound by the pain of the past. They had turned their suffering into strength. Instead of competing or feeling bitterness toward one another, they uplifted each other, proving that women could rise above betrayal and find happiness on their own terms. Sekou, once a powerful man, could only watch from a distance as the women he had deceived flourished without him. He had thought they would always need him, that they would fight over him, beg him to choose one of them. But he was wrong. They did not need him at all. They had built something far greater than he had ever given them, a life of dignity, purpose, and success. In time, Nabinti and Nia became examples for other women in their communities. They showed that a woman's worth was not tied to a man's love or approval. Their businesses thrived, their confidence grew, and they proved that even after betrayal, life could be beautiful again. They had lost a husband, but they had gained something far more valuable: freedom. Seku had once been a man of great wealth and power, but now everything was slipping through his fingers. His business had crumbled, his reputation was in ruins, and the respect he once commanded had vanished. Everywhere he went, people whispered about his deceit. Former friends avoided him, and his business partners no longer trusted him. He was a man who had built his life on lies, and now those lies had destroyed him. Alone and desperate, Seku finally understood the depth of his mistakes. He had taken two kind and loving women for granted, thinking he could control them forever. But Nabinti and Nia had shown him that they were stronger than he ever imagined. They had not fought over him, nor had they waited for his approval. Instead, they had built successful lives without him. This realization filled him with regret, and for the first time, he felt the full weight of his actions. One evening, Seku gathered his courage and traveled to see Nia. When she opened the door and saw him standing there, she was not surprised. She had expected this moment to come. He fell to his knees before her, his voice trembling as he begged for forgiveness. "Nia, I was a fool. I was greedy and selfish. I never meant to hurt you, but I did, and I regret it every day. Please, find it in your heart to forgive me." Nia listened quietly, her face calm. She had moved past her pain, and though she no longer felt hatred for Seku, she also felt no love for him. "I have already forgiven you, Seku," she said, her voice steady. "But forgiveness does not mean I will return to you. You made your choices, and now you must live with them. I have built a new life, one where I am free, and I will not go back to the past." Heartbroken, Seku left and made his way to Lumora, where Nabinti now lived. He found her outside her home, tending to a patient. She barely looked up when he approached. He fell to his knees once again, tears streaming down his face. "Nabinti, I was wrong. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I threw it all away. Please give me another chance." Nabinti sighed and shook her head. "Seku, I am no longer the woman you deceived. I have found my purpose, and it does not include being your wife. I will not hold hatred in my heart, but I will not let you back into my life either. You must find your own path now." Seku hung his head in shame. He had lost them both, not because of fate or misfortune, but because of his own greed and dishonesty. As he walked away, he realized he was truly alone. Nabinti and Nia had moved on, stronger than ever, while he was left to face the bitter consequences of his own choices. Nabinti and Nia had once been strangers, brought together by betrayal and heartbreak. But instead of letting Seku's lies destroy them, they had chosen a different path, one of strength, unity, and independence. Now, as the years passed, they remained the closest of friends, their bond unshaken by the pain they had endured. Nia's textile business flourished beyond her dreams. She designed and sold beautiful fabrics, attracting buyers from different villages. People admired not just her skill, but also her resilience. Women in Mabundo looked up to her, inspired by her courage to walk away from a broken marriage and build something of her own. Traders from far and wide came to her shop, eager to learn from her, and soon she began teaching other women the secrets of her trade, helping them start their own businesses. Meanwhile, Nabinti's healing practice became one of the most respected in Lumora. She had always been gifted with knowledge of herbs and medicine, but now people traveled from distant villages just to seek her help. Her reputation as a kind and wise healer spread quickly, and even the village elders sought her advice in times of need. Nabinti no longer saw herself as a woman who had been deceived. She saw herself as a woman who had risen above deception and built a new life on her own terms. The people of Lumora admired both women, telling their story as a lesson to young girls about the power of self-worth and independence. They spoke of how two women had been wronged, but had not let their pain turn into hatred. Instead, they had transformed their suffering into strength, proving that no betrayal could break a woman who believed in herself. One evening, as the sun set over Lumora, Nabinti and Nia sat together outside Nabinti's home, watching the sky turn shades of orange and gold. They had both come so far, and now they lived without fear, without heartbreak, and most importantly, without betrayal. "Do you ever think about him?" Nia asked softly, though there was no bitterness in her voice. "Not anymore," Nabinti said with a smile. "His choices led him to his fate. Ours led us here. They laughed together, feeling lighter than ever. They were no longer women defined by their past. They were women who had built a future of their own. And in the village of Lumora, their names would be remembered not as the wives of Seku, but as the women who proved that honesty, loyalty, and self-respect would always triumph over lies.